I plan to self-publish something rather soon, so I've been forced to ruminate on yet another conundrum. I plan to paywall this thing. I plan to sell eventually, in spite of the fact that I've always argued and will continue to argue that all art should be for free. I believe that art should be free because money divides access, and I've strongly been led to believe, and it is true, it must be true, that art is kept from me and my friends. There are certain people that are just not supposed to have access to art, and art in both practice and distribution has always been for the rich and the upper middle class. It is systemically illegal for me to be into a lot of the things I'm into, as access is and always has been divided by a certain line. However, access has existed through alternative means. Ashitano Joe is one of the most influential manga series of all time, and it's one of my personal favorites since I was 14. I spoke about that in a video once. But the grammar of shonen manga, particularly of course sports manga, has been defined by this story about this ostracized, impoverished young man who's been left with nothing in his life but boxing. Through boxing, he makes his way out of prison, out of the slums, and rises through the ranks until the point where he becomes an internationally recognized athlete, until his ambition itself becomes his undoing. It still holds up impressively well, but for over 50 years, there hasn't been a legal way to read this manga. One of the most influential manga of all time in English. I try not to outwardly condone anything illegal or below the line, but people, I'm Jamaican, you must know that the types of media I'm into and talk about and discuss all the time is not the kind of thing that Jamaicans are typically supposed to have access to. I make manga and read manga, however, in the years when I was most into manga, all the manga that have shaped my taste, they didn't sell that stuff in bookstores. In more recent years, they've started because the local weeb community is so large, but all of us have been into this stuff long before there was any inexpensive way to be into this stuff. Recently, I've come into a position where I'm better able to order the things I want online, whether those financial decisions are wise or not. But before then, there was only one way I've had access to manga. When I got into cinema, same thing. Big indie movies people on letterboxd are always going on and on about are not being shown in my theaters. Definitely not the classics, definitely not anything non-English or non-American. When I was going into university to study film for the first time, I was able to peer pressure my mother into setting up an account on the Criterion channel, and quickly found out that for God knows what reason, the Criterion channel is limited to North America. The thing I was appreciate about Criterion and what they do is that they preserve old films, all kinds of films from all around the world, and make them more accessible to watch and in high quality. But apparently, they were only available to access by the Americans. Probably something telling about that. Anyways, that's how I ended up getting access to Mubi instead. Let's talk about Mubi. The first thing Mubi introduced me to was Agnes Varda, who for some reason I just hadn't come across before. Agnes Varda was one of the first and most important figures of the French New Wave, and the only one who maintained her level of quality consistently up to decades later, in my opinion. Her final film was literally released the year she died in 2019. Why do we not talk about her as much as we talk about Godard, or Truffaut, or Romer? I wonder. And ever since, she's become one of my favorite filmmakers and indeed people of all time. This is what Mubi serves, or maybe served, to be. A space for these overlooked voices, a home for the art house, avant-garde, and underground cinema all around the world. There are so many films I would not know about had it not been for Mubi. So many filmmakers I would not have gotten introduced to from all around the world. Mubi has, of course, been moving though, getting bigger, more mainstream. The height of this is maybe their originally produced film The Substance, which got mainstream success and even got them Academy Awards. More high-profile actors, directors, and producers are working with them now. They've been getting financing and backing from all kinds of parties, all kinds of entities. Then this year, just as they announced that they would be showing the entire series of Twin Peaks to honor David Lynch, it got leaked that they've taken up funding from a venture capital firm whose founders are actively supporting the genocide of Palestine. The service that I've come to truly love for uplifting the voices of the voiceless and acknowledging the existence of those outside of the global north have decided to be complicit in the destruction of those voices. We get our movies, our cool, artsy cinema, see, but don't look at reality. Don't look at where your money's actually going. I spoke in that video that no one watched about the institutionalization of the avant-garde. Is Mubi really on the side of the avant-garde, or are they just here to feed those who like the feeling of supporting the avant-garde, all while perpetuating the need for the avant-garde to exist instead of actually helping to break that barrier in the first place? The inevitabilities of consumerism, the inevitabilities of capitalism, the many such cases of the outsider being eaten by the establishment, further creating the need for deviance. For over 50 years, there has technically been no legal way to read Ashita no Joe, one of the most influential and one of my own favorite manga, in English. Until last year. Would you look at that? I wouldn't have come across Agnes had it not been for Mubi. I wouldn't have started using Mubi had I not already been a die-hard cinephile. I wouldn't have become a die-hard cinephile had it not been for shady online websites that gave me access to films I couldn't get any other way. Look at that. Piracy doesn't kill the industry. The system kills the industry. It's been said by much more prominent people than myself that piracy is film's biggest export. I don't buy for a second that people reading manga or watching old French films on shady websites is actually hurting the industries I care about, because there should not be that necessity to begin with. I love my art and give back to the industries I care about when I can. I'd prefer to do so all the time. However, there is injustice from the inside that creates the necessity for everyone outside of the US and Europe to be forced to seek more creative means of accessing their art. Money should never be a barrier to art. This is what I've always believed and continue to believe. Now here I am, trying to get my own little independent project off the ground. Has the time finally come for me to eat my words? I want to release this thing physically because in spite of everything, I love the richness of tangibility. I like the idea of having work you love physically available on your bookshelf. I like the feeling of turning a page. I like the idea of this stuff being on shelves in stores. I wouldn't mind, though, the idea of people sharing the work or passing it with their friends. In 7th grade, I remember Sausage Party, that damn thing. The kids in my class were passing around the DVD like some kind of illegal drugs or something. They were all secretive because it's supposed to be this dirty movie and all that. I like the idea of kids in school passing this around like that. I remember I got the manga Slam Dunk when I was in high school. legally, and I lent it to one guy, and before I knew it, my damn book was being passed around the whole weeb circuit, and I had no idea where it was. When I eventually got it, some guy I only spoke to like once or twice had it. I was horrified. The thing was kind of bent up on all that. But I wouldn't mind at all people bending up my books like that. Kids, lend this to your friends. Pass it around. Crush up all the pages. Whatever. As long as people are reading it, my job is done. I'm selling it because I do want to make money. This is my attempt to start what I want to do for the rest of my life before I'm out of university and have to lock in, you know. The most crucial thing isn't necessarily how much money is made, just that my work is out there. I want it to be a good enough amount of money to justify spending my life doing this. But I make stuff because I want people to see them. I guess I'm still naive like that, maybe. Not to turn this into an ad, but this is why I really value things like Patreon. I increasingly am not sure that I am the type of artist who is really meant to see mainstream success or be fully dependent on established systems. So something like Patreon genuinely is the only thing keeping me going. If barely. Even here, the algorithm has clearly changed, and I'm not sure really what to do. I spent 6 months on a video that ended up being my biggest flop to date. I'm not gonna lie, I'm very demotivated to put even any of myself into these anymore. And the breadcrumbs I've been getting from AdSense lately is frightening. Not to sound too dramatic, but genuinely I have been questioning what future I have here. And that's why we have things like Patreon. It really is the closest thing to art socialism that exists under this system. And when creators tell you to support their stuff on Patreon, it genuinely is so that they can continue making the things you like. Like, legit, I never used to understand why people make certain kinds of content until the last few months. So I'm not even trying to make too much of an ad out of it, but sincerely, if you care about the things that I make and don't want me to either have to stop or damage the quality of what I put out, do consider the Patreon. Though at this point, I have begun to think about what other avenues there might be financially. But back to my fiction, I know what it is to be there, you know. I couldn't get mad. I'm not releasing this graphic novel for free. I genuinely have worked too hard at this point. But I won't flip my lid if people can't pay for it. The new butler is free. That's actually a part of the whole theme, the whole message of the thing. So if you pay for it, I've sold my soul or something. Though I do have an interesting epilogue idea that I might charge, which would itself be thematically relevant. I don't know, I'll figure it out. Anyway, art is for everyone. To hell with people who make moralistic judgments on how you access it. That is all.